Hello there. Welcome back to Star Wars Timeline Podcast. My name is Ben, and today I'd like to talk about the Book of Boba Fett. Before we jump into our topic, I wanted to quickly just say thank you to all my fans who have followed me through 2021. It's been quite an adventure. I appreciate all of your support, and I hope in this year you guys come back and we will have more meaningful discussions where you leave your comments down in the video section below and express your ideas and thoughts and see where you agree or disagree with me, because I think that's the entire point of Star Wars fandom, to have everybody's voice represented. Please don't mind the empty walls behind me. I'm sort of rearranging my room. I expect to have a nice nifty shelf with like all the neon lights coming forward in a couple of days. So, you know, the setup will be nice and neat looking. But today I have to deal just with this. This podcast will be divided into two parts. I will ask the question, should we judge a show by its first episode? And I will present first an argument why yes, we should do it, and express some of my pros and cons. And we'll also talk about the negative side of it, why we shouldn't do it, and what are the pros and cons of not judging a show by its first episode. So, okay, first part, let's get into it. Yes, I think that we should all judge a TV show by its first episode, because a television show, just like a movie or video game, it's a product, right? And it's meant to sell. People invest tons of money and time and effort into it, and not just from the commercial aspect, but a lot of creatives, right? Artists and 3D graphic designers and visual effects people, composers. People invest so much energy into it. I believe that a lot rides on that very first episode, which is the first impression. It's like you're coming to a date, right? And you want your date to be very impressive, and this is how we all form our first biases on the person. And then, of course, we get to meet them, we talk with them, and we get to know what their personality is like. But the first impression is always visual. Sometimes you're attracted to somebody based on just the looks. You're at a party, you see somebody, I want to come approach that person and say hello to them. Same with the show. The idea is, if it's a product, then the first episode is basically a commercial. It's meant to sell all the investors, and it's meant to sell us, the audience, and tell us this is what you can look forward to when you get the final product. It also sets the expectation. You know, you might argue that later episodes, obviously in the instance of a show like Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett, both are directed by different talents from episode to episode, and even have different writers. But I think that the first episode, regardless of how many people are involved, still shares a common vision, a common goal, and a story that is supposed to take us from point A in episode 1 to point B by the final episode. And the first episode always, it sets the tone and pacing. It gives it a visual flair with the style of the shows, what it's going to look like. It tells us what the quality of the cinematography we can expect, and also gives us a hint. And I want to reinforce this point, just a hint of what kind of storytelling we can see and look forward to in the future episodes. Yes, it's just the first episode, and I will return to this discussion later on during my second half of this podcast. But in this example, why we should judge it, I'm saying that it should give us enough story to kind of say, I don't know if this show is for me, so this is the direction it's going. It should be a flag for a viewer, because look, let's be obvious about it. We all have our lives to go on with. A lot of us work, countless hours, and not a lot of people can invest time into coming off work and binge watch something that they probably are not going to like, right? And the first episode should always be there as a flag saying, hey, you like this type of show with a lot of action? Boom, go watch this. You want something with a suspense that harkens back to the old school 80s cinema? Go watch Stranger Things. You want like a crazy criminal drama with insane plot twists? Go watch Breaking Bad, and so forth. You get the idea. Also, I believe as experienced viewers, I'm sure tons of you guys watch other sci-fi shows like, old school Battlestar Galactica or modern stuff like the Hawkeye and so forth. And you can pick up on nuance in the way that the particular show is filmed. Right from the first episode, you can say, okay, I saw this scene. It's not shaping up for me. I don't like what they're doing here cinematically. I don't like how they're directing the actors, even though this particular show might have my favorite actor. And to give you an idea, let's look at 2019 Joker movie by Todd Phillips. Let me just take a quick sip. Now, obviously, you might say, Ben, hold on a second. Wait, you're comparing a movie to a show? Yes, in this particular example, in this context, please hear me out. When we go to see, or at least when I went to see, and obviously all of this podcast is my own opinion. I'm not trying to push it on you guys, but when you go to see that movie, Joker, right, from 2019, it was sold to us as something entirely different. Even when you looked at the commercial, it didn't look like a typical comic book story. And when you saw the film too, it's basically a criminal drama, which is like a character study of this psychopath and how he becomes the way that he is. And from majority of DC fans that I talked to, including myself, people went in with zero expectations because they knew that this particular movie is divorced from the rest of the DC universe. Even the filmmakers themselves sold the movie as saying, look, guys, this is not part of our canonical DC universe. It's just a self-contained experimental movie which deals more with like crime and drama and this character study. So I was very, very impressed with the first initial scene in that movie, right? If you guys recall, in the intro, he's sitting in his locker room. He's changing his dressing, and he has this paint on him, and he's staring in this mirror, and he starts pulling his mouth like so, and making these really awkward and repulsive faces. And there's not even dialogue going on in that scene. And it's just one scene, which lasted, I don't know, maybe a couple minutes. But there's so much going on in there narratively. There's such a crazy amount of tension and musical component that reinforces the picture. And it just made such a striking scene. It hooked me right away. And this is the example I'm trying to say, that I believe that the pilot episode to a show, regardless if it's an hour and a half or if it's 40 minutes long, it can reveal in a single scene what that Joker movie did in its introductory scene as well. Obviously, we would have to go back and experience the rest of the show to see where it all leads to, but you could have as powerful single scene to sell us the entire episode and the future show. You know, if you had something that's as powerful happening in the Book of Boba Fett, spoiler alert, let's get right into it and discuss one scene from the Book of Boba Fett. Once again, spoiler alert, it's a minor one. If you guys don't want to hear it, please shut your ears during this moment. But in the beginning of that episode, two things happen. There's one scene where we go back to the clone era, and Boba Fett is kind of like dreaming of his times when he saw his dad getting killed by the Jedi on Geonosis, right? And then there is another scene where we see him crawl out of the Sarlacc pit. Two separate things happening there. One scene I felt was very effective, where they meaningfully went back to the prequel era, retraced their steps, and said, well, we think that particular event would be formative into who Boba Fett becomes later as an adult. So I felt that was done effectively. That was a strong anchor and a strong example where a scene compares to something like the Joker, where it gives you something to look forward to what the rest of the show could be. Now, another scene in the same very episode to me revealed the problems I have with this first episode. And of course, I'm going to see the rest of the show just like the rest of you guys and judge it on its merit as a whole product. But I just wanted to point it out. When they show that particular shot, when he's in the Sarlacc pit, he's like in those guts, and he takes out from one of the stormtroopers like little pipe thing to breathe. It's an iconic picture in Star Wars comics, but I felt it was devoid of any nuance in the show. It's just there. They show it to you. He's there and he crawls out. There's no emotion. There is no tension happening. Oh my God, he needs to crawl out. You know, he needs to survive. If they would have stayed with that scene for a little bit longer and build that mounting tension that he's on the brink of death, he needs to crawl out, it felt very pedestrian. It felt like it was just filmed there just to slap it into the show and show us, okay, here's inside here, and now he's out crawling onto the sand. It wasn't there for me. I believe that single scene could have been directed far more effectively and established that tension that I'm looking for from the movies like The Joker. And the last point I wanted to make in why we should judge the first episode of a TV show is that it will tell us what to look forward to in terms of aesthetic and because when we see a first episode, we have to realize that this entire season has been already filmed, and there's not much room for reaction to criticism and retconning ideas and say, well, fans didn't react too well to the first episode. Maybe we can pace things up a little bit differently in episode 4 and 5, add a little bit more of action in episode 8, and finish up with a bang in episode 15, right? A lot of higher budgeted TV shows, or most of the shows today, I would surmise, like the Boba Fett, the Hawkeye, the WandaVision, or all of these shows, they're filmed and then they're dropped on these streaming services and we get to watch them. So it's pretty much set in stone to what stylistically what it's going to look like, unless the showrunners had no clue how to direct different episode directors and writers into one cohesive product. You would think that Disney or not, they pretty much have a clear idea what the thing is going to look like, what the show needs to tell in the first episode, and that's set in stone. That's my point. And there's not much of playroom from episode 1 to the rest of the episodes. It's pretty much, if you were disappointed, I would argue that you will stay with that on that wave and be like, man, this episode didn't work for me, and the later episodes don't improve much either. So what are the pros and cons of doing that, of judging, the show by its first episode? The pros are that you'll have an idea what to expect, and you will set aside your personal biases and say, like, well, okay, I expected this, but this is what the show actually is telling me. This is what it looks like. This is what it feels like. This is what the sort of action it's going to have. I was expecting some Jedi action, but it's actually about gunslingers. Okay, I get the idea. That's a positive thing. That's a good thing. That's a pro, definitely. And you can decide from that point forward whether you want to spend more time with a show or move on to something else. Let's say shelf it for a little while and then come back to it when the entire season is out, and maybe binge watch it when the entire season is dropped, which actually a lot of fans from the Star Wars Timeline Facebook group have telling me, like, I'm not in a hurry, I'm going to first wait until the entire thing is out there, and then I'll binge watch it and decide if I like it or not. Okay, so what are the negatives of doing that and jumping into conclusions too quickly? Well, you may not realize, but you're just getting the first taste of things to come. And if you judge things too harshly, you might miss something that you will potentially enjoy. You say, like, okay, I looked at the show, I saw the first episode, this is what the whole thing is supposed to be like. I'm not feeling it. Goodbye. See ya. I'm going to go watch another show. And you'll probably miss something in the process, like along the way. Episode 5 might have cool action scene that you probably will like, or some character, right, shows up that we don't know about. That even in the trailer that we had, there's a couple of characters there that we didn't see yet. Maybe they'll be interesting to you. Who knows? You might miss out on that. And the last thing is, one of the cons I wanted to mention is that you won't give credit to other writers, directors, and all the creatives who worked on the show and who also put their own spin and creative flavor on other episodes. And I think it's not fair to do. If you just dismiss based on the first episode, maybe you're somebody who's not a fan of Robert Rodriguez and his earlier work. Okay, so this episode didn't work for you. And then you will miss out on something else. Maybe you will find out a director in the future episode which you adore their work from some other TV show, and you'll skip out on that and you will be ignorant. You won't even realize that was the case. So those are my pros and cons. Let's go to the second half and say why we shouldn't judge a show by its first episode. Well, in this instance, I'm going to use the timeless tip of the iceberg analogy, right? The first episode of the first season isn't indicative of the entire show. It's just a tip of the iceberg, literally. It's just showing you this little much. Of course, they want to save all the best storytelling, all the best action, all the great character reveals, all the coolest cameos. Remember Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian Season 2? That's all coming. We barely touched the tip of the iceberg. We just got one episode and we didn't see anything the show has to offer. I don't care if it's 25 episodes or 7 episodes. This is just chapter 1. There's more to come. And globally, as a whole unit, as a whole thing, it might look completely different. I would argue that the first pilot episode is basically a proof of concept. It might be rushed a little bit. It might be shaky in terms of like finalizing the visual effects or directing an actor. They need to throw it all together and film it and show a proof of concept to what the rest of the show is going to look like to the people who are giving them the money, Kathleen Kennedy or whoever may it be who's behind it at Disney, who are saying, look, okay, we're going to invest X amount of budget to this Book of Boba Fett show. Show us what you guys can do. And, they slapped the first episode together. And then when they get the green light and they say, okay, let's proceed with that. This is good enough. Show us what else you guys could do. Then they probably sit down and say, okay, so we wrote out the episodes. This is our first episode that we already filmed. Let's see what we can improve upon. Let's see which director's talents we could exploit in episode 6 to indicate this particular story beat. Or towards the season finale, the grand action sequence needs to be really on the money. Let's hire this director, and he really knows how to do like gun action or like massive scale, warfare zones, kind of like a setup. Maybe we'll have him. So the rest of the show might take a life on its own from the first episode from then on. I would also say that we shouldn't do, and you go ahead and judge the first episode, because as I mentioned before, all the best ideas happen in the middle of the show. All the best storytelling, all the best plot twist. And obviously the absolute climax, the rousing, conclusion comes at the end, at the final episode. You might get the best revelation, or you might get the best action sequence, like Luke Skywalker came out of nowhere. Nobody expected him, not even the makers of the show, right? They had the whole Plo Koon deceiving kind of like a thing going on the shooting stage. So even the people who were working in the show wouldn't know there was actually Luke Skywalker that's supposed to show up at the end. Look at that. A lot of fans fell in love with that, and it was a saving grace of the show, and people thought it was like better than all of the Star Wars sequels and stuff like that. It's a good thing. And once again, I want to reiterate that one filmmaker, one director doesn't equal to the rest of the show. Robert Rodriguez directed this first episode. Some people enjoy his work, some people don't. I fall in the category of people who like some of his movies. But we have to understand that he's a human being. He can't always be on top of his game and perform the best, even when such a special occasion as filming Star Wars calls for him. Even Steven Spielberg has held his flukes and has had a couple of movies that are not all that good. AI comes to mind. That was one of those. But Robert Rodriguez, Desperado was a dope movie. It had tons of action, ton of likable characters. It had everything you would expect from a cool action movie. He made From Dusk Till Dawn. Those of you who are dinosaurs like me, who are old enough, who have seen it in movie theaters, it just blew your mind, like with its unexpected twist, which is like a movie started as a criminal drama, turned into this vampire hunting fest, which was like, whoa, what am I looking at? It was crazy. He's clearly a talented director. I just personally felt that for whatever powers may be, whatever goes behind the scenes, I won't even begin to suspect what really goes on there, what happens. Just the episode wasn't as strong for me. It wasn't entirely bad, but I wasn't thrilled with it either. And guys, I'm not gonna jump on Robert Rodriguez's throat and say, well, he let me down, he failed us, he isn't the director I was looking for. Like, hey, dude, how come your previous movies I was a huge fan of, you let me down here? What happened? You dropped the ball. I'm not gonna do that. It just didn't work. That's all. That's all it is. So what are some of the pros and cons of not judging the show by its first episode? First huge pro is that you may be pleasantly surprised with the rest of the show. It might come hidden surprises. You might have story that really picks up and becomes interesting and engaging and tense. Everything that I'm personally looking for in a show. I favor story first, and all the action and cinematography and special effects second. And you might find something to anchor to. Like, for example, I wasn't a biggest fan of the storytelling in The Mandalorian show, but I really liked it. I liked all the visual aspects of it. I liked all the quirky different characters that come into it, like Cara Dune. She was pretty cool. And that first alien that Din Djarin apprehends in the first episode. Of course, all the Imperials were pretty cool too. And the action really drew me in. If I didn't like the story, at least I liked the action. It was worthy show for me to watch. And another thing I want to mention is that you will see this episode from a different perspective, right? Once you get the complete picture and the season finale and the credits roll, you're like, oh, okay. So we didn't get nearly enough spotlight on these particular scenes that they show us. We just got a snippet of a young Boba Fett on the Geonosis. Maybe there's more to it they try to tell us. Maybe all of these images that seem inconsequential in the first episode will align themselves into something special that will generate storytelling and will generate feelings in us and evoke that tension. It'll be like, oh man, this is what they were doing. Or maybe this will not happen. Maybe you're a different person. Who knows? But that's one of the things that is potentially could happen. And what are the cons of not judging the show by its first episode? I would say the con is that you basically hype yourself up and say like, well, no, well, let me stick with the show. It will get better. And, I'm hopeful. It will get exciting. It will have the things that I'm personally looking for. And you'll just set up yourself a failure. You'll waste more time watching a show that you potentially may not like. And you will feel bad. You'll feel like Disney and the rest of the filmmakers are professionals are conspiring against you and deliberately trying to piss off the fans. And that's not a place to be for any fan. Getting emotional and other, excuse me, guys, and other YouTubers who are thriving on controversy and like spreading, all the hatred and anger geared towards Disney, towards Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, whoever you take. There's so many different fans out there. They will prey on your emotions and say, well, see, I told you the show is going to be bad. It's going to be garbage. Nobody wants to be in that place. We want to feel good about Star Wars. We want to celebrate Star Wars and find the good things in it, not the negatives. So these are some of the cons that you might experience. So in the outro, I'm not your friend or your parent or your superior to give you guys an advice, but I would give an advice to myself. And I would say, don't react emotionally based on just the first episode, which both myself and my younger brother Joe, he watched it with me, we weren't particularly thrilled. I would have patience personally with the show and see where it goes. I will give it a shot. And, maybe at the end I will be pleasantly surprised. Now, I don't want to be surprised the way that we were with Luke Skywalker. That didn't work for me personally. But I know there's an army of fans, maybe yourself included, who felt it was a huge cameo that basically put Star Wars on the map again. More power to you. Maybe there'll be some other cameos. Like, I'm really kind of hoping for Mace Windu. I know it's out there. I know it's a crazy kind of thing to ask for. It's not even an ask. I would be really surprised to see him in there, and if he's like expertly woven into the story that he's the survivor of the Order 66 and he lived past the Galactic Civil War and he saw the Emperor's fall, that would be a thing, because we don't really have a full indication of how old humans can really get in the Star Wars galaxy. Who knows? A pleasant cameo like that would be really awesome. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all of your support in 2021. This year, a lot more cool podcasts are coming your way. And I'll see you guys next time. May the Force be with you. Take care.